So now it's time to move on to our next segment for the evening, and I'm really excited about this one, Rana. This is where we invite a special guest to sit down with our host for an electric back and forth conversation. There's no immediate problem we're trying to solve. This is just a space for us to lean in and get curious. For this month's Fireside Chat, we're delighted to welcome Professor Karim Lakhani from Harvard Business School. Professor Karim Lakhani is the Dorothy and Michael Hensey Professor of Business Administration at the Harvard Business School. His research focuses on the intersection of technology, innovation, AI, and company strategy. He is also the co-author of the 2020 book, Competing in the Age of AI, and he acts as an advisor to senior executives, educating them on AI strategy and technology-driven transformation. Welcome, Professor Lakhani.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here with you.
Thank you. I know you two have a lot to get into, so I'm going to hop off and rejoin later.
See you in a bit, Jodine. Bye-bye. Hi, Karim.
Hey, Rana. Good to see you again.
It is great to see you again. Just so the audience knows, we have some history together. So you invited me to join as an executive fellow at the Harvard Business School. We've done a little bit of teaching together, and
yes.
You've been supporting a lot of my investments and my fund. So thank you for being here. My first question to you, actually, there's this myth that professors take the summer off, and it's is that true?
Well, it depends on the professor. So some are diligent at taking breaks and taking long breaks. My wife tells me that I'm failing at tenure, that I should be, calling in at noon and having a scotch every afternoon. That's not my life these days. I feel so privileged to be a faculty member at Harvard, to have the platform and the infrastructure to do incredible work and to also connect with people. And so I feel it as a responsibility to keep working, especially right now in this age.
Yeah. So I want to start by asking you, because basically you've been really looking into how AI is impacting productivity and work. So perhaps we start there. What are some of your findings?
Yeah, so, the book that we put out, that Marco Iancita and I put out in 2020, was a culmination of about 8 years of research and looking at companies and how they were organizing themselves around AI and around data. And that research really sort of, and this was pre-ChatGPT, right? This is all machine learning models, all the things you had done and so forth. And that book really showed to us that, in fact, a new form of an organization was emerging in which data and AI were at the center, and the work that was being done by these organizations was being done by the machines and not by the humans. The humans designed the machines, the humans monitored the machines, the humans updated the machines, but the work itself was being done by the machines. And in our private lives, in our consumer lives, we have this, right? When you use Uber, there's no dispatcher you're calling to connect you to it. When you get a recommendation from Netflix, there's no editor saying, Rana, these are the movies you need to watch. It's all driven by data and by machines, by AI. And that meant that a new type of an organization was coming, which scaled in a very interesting exponential way. And so the poster child for us in our book was this company out of China called Ant Group, which is a financial services provider. And the thing that stunned me, there were two facts that stunned me about them. One was, they were serving 1.2 billion users with only 15,000 employees.
It's crazy, right?
And that talk about super productivity, that is a crazy number. And when I talk to, financial institutions here in the US, they would say, well, it might take us 2 million employees to serve a billion, or maybe 10 million employees to serve a billion users, not 15,000. And what you can imagine is that every single part of the business was rethought with data and AI at the center. And so that's the one fact. The other fact about Ant was like 310. Like they said, 3 minutes to do anything on their platform, 1 minute for approval, 0 human intervention. Right. And so it's like, okay, so they had this crazy metric of 310. And so I would always joke that, my bank here in the US also has 310, but it's like 3 months, 1 month, and zero computers. And then also, but also 310 for me has become this crying call to say, what are you going to do, Mr. Executive, Miss Executive, in your business to achieve, like, what is your 310 equivalent, and how would you sort of rethink your business around these kinds of productivity goals that you might have?
In your book, Competing in the Age of AI, you also talk about, like, we all know about the economies of scale, but you talk about the economies of scope. Can you comment on that? What is that?
Yeah, absolutely. So in fact, the book sort of lays out this very simple model framework that says a business is defined by two things: the business model and the operating model. And when we think about the business model, there's how you create value. So why are customers coming to you and transacting with you instead of going somewhere else? And how you capture value. And you actually want to separate those two dimensions out. There's value creation and there's value capture. And then we think about, from the operating model, the thing that actually delivers value to your customers. Then we have three dimensions. There's scale, scope, and learning. And what we see AI doing is helping you with scale, as we discussed already, but also scope. The data of one customer transaction and what they're doing can help you then imagine new use cases for you to offer to those customers. So the scope expands. Again, if you think about our consumer lives, all the different services that Google starts to offer us, all the different services that Meta offers us, and so on and so forth. That's the scope. And the same interaction then allows you to then think about the next set of things you could offer the customer. So there's economies of scope.
Which also, I think is interesting. Sorry to interrupt you, but I think it's really interesting because throughout my entire journey, founding and growing Affectiva, you always hear, like, you should focus. Absolutely. But now with this data and economies of scope, you can be really smart and address, like, enter adjacent markets, right?
Exactly. And I think, of course, you want to do it sequentially, but you should be focused in on increasing scope as much as you are going to think about scale. And I think the scope allows you to serve the same customer with more things. And scope allows you to serve lots of customers. And then driving both of those is what we call learning and learning effects. That the data should help you learn continuously about what works and what doesn't work as well. And so that was the part of the story.
That was pre-ChatGPT. Yeah, exactly.
And so now, like, ChatGPT shows up, and when I first saw it, I was kind of stunned as what it was doing. And the test, I remember, I used to be on Twitter a lot, and there was a whole academic Twitter, econ Twitter, and a colleague of mine, Kevin Smith in Toronto, posted that he went to ChatGPT and 3.5 and asked it questions that he got asked in his PhD oral exams, and he goes that it answered really well. And so I did the same thing. I put the questions I got. It was as you remember, oral exams are horrendous. You get shot by 10 different other professors. They're asking you random questions. I was asked, how would you advise George Bush on innovation policy? I'm like, I'm studying innovation, but I'm not studying policy. But I had to come up with the anyway. So I put all these questions in, and again, I was stunned at the responses, and so I knew something interesting was going on. And immediately I got thinking about, look, what we need to understand is, if these superpowers become available to everybody, what happens?
Right.
And the framework our team at my lab and the postdocs and that I work with has been and the collaborators I have has been to sort of think about this as in terms of what it does to, if you're at a certain skill level now and now you have ChatGPT available, how does it move your skill level? What does it do for you?
Right.
And what we imagine it as a very simple, imagine it like a normal distribution or Gaussian distribution of skills, right? There's people at the average, people at the high end, people at the low end, and what we imagined was that this would shift everybody to the right. Everybody would get smarter because of this. So that was the hypothesis. And then I've been obsessed with doing studies that are very scientific when it comes to innovation. So the last 15 years, I've built a lab. We run field experiments, like randomized controlled trials on innovation settings. And so we thought of ChatGPT as a drug. So let's think of it as a drug. And if you give that drug to knowledge workers, to professionals, to entrepreneurs, all of us that are listening in, what does it do to us? And so we worked with Boston Consulting Group, and we ran this experiment where we had a bunch of people get the drug and a bunch of people not get the drug. And we looked at two different types of work that consultants often did. One was more creative, problem-solving, innovation-related work, and one was more analytical work, much more like analyzing numbers and so on and so forth. And what we discovered here was both great news and bad news. The great news was that on the creative task where the AI is really good at, generative AI is really good at, your performance improved by 40%. which is kind of massive, right? 40% improvement is kind of massive, especially on a sample of elite consultants, right? Graduating from top schools. So that was like a big aha for us. At the same time, we discovered for the tasks that the AI was not good at, performance dropped. Those using AI did worse than those not using AI. And this is where it matters to us to actually have a point of view that says that it's easy for us as humans to fall asleep at the wheel. This is a line from my postdoc, Fabrizio Dell'Acqua. Fabrizio, as part of his PhD at Columbia, came in and sort of looked at what would happen to people when they were given good AI. Would they keep performing as well? And he discovered that no, that what happens is that people have a sense of like they slack a bit when it comes to with good AI, and so then they miss the edge cases that the AI misses. And so that was a big aha for us. And so, but overall, what we see is that the productivity effects are kind of massive. And we see this not just in our lab. My colleague Ayelet Israeli has a consumer intelligence lab at our institute, and she has shown that you could do consumer research with ChatGPT. You can do market research. You can get willingness to pay estimates that match real consumer data, which is quite amazing. My colleague Rem Koning in the Tech for All lab has done a project looking at entrepreneurs in like small and medium-sized entrepreneurs in Kenya. They have chicken farms, they have dairy farms, they have small tea shops and so forth. And he finds that, again, the ChatGPT has a pretty important effect on their productivity as well and their revenues if it's used correctly. So we're seeing this over and over again, that for us as knowledge workers, this is already a big boost in our productivity and things we like to do and things we don't like to do as well.
Yeah, I have so many follow-on questions, but one in particular with my investor hat on, as I'm looking at these AI native or AI first startups, do you think they'll be more capital efficient? They'll get to, say, profitability? Because it's almost like I'm seeing a dichotomy. Like some examples are like large language model companies. They're so capital intensive and it's actually not sustainable at all for they're so compute intense.
Yeah.
But perhaps some of the vertical AI solution companies, perhaps they can be more capital efficient. I don't know. Do you have a point of view on that?
So many thoughts.
Okay.
So on the first, I could go on forever. So on the first thing is like, I think of this moment now as 1908. The Ford Model T has been invented. It's coming off the assembly line. But it's like the roads have not been invented. We haven't done proper engineering on the engine, on the transmission. There's no seat belts yet. Nothing, right? Literally. And over 20, 30 years, a whole bunch of infrastructure got built around to make the cars safer, cars more affordable, and so on and so forth. I think we're at the same stage with generative AI models. It is literally like 1908. It has just come out of the lab, right? And we're trying to rapidly industrialize it. Now, hopefully it doesn't take 50 years for us to invent seatbelts, right? We can do it faster. And of course, that's part of the ethical AI work that's going on everywhere, including at our institute. So I expect that we hardcore engineering on these models has not been done yet. And I think that's gonna take some time, but I expect that over time, those efficiencies will then mean less power, less data, and so forth for us to be able to get what we want out of them. The second thing that I would sort of say is that the laws of innovation can't be ignored. What we know about how innovation processes work is that when a new technology comes through, there is a massive sort of recombinant explosion of new ideas and new things that need to be done with this technology. Most of these things fail. We saw that in the auto industry. We saw that in the tires industry back when the auto. But even if you remember, do you remember all the search engines that came out?
Right.
Like Lycos and
Alta
before
Vista.
Google was Alta Vista. I love Alta Vista, exactly.
Yeah.
Excite, Ask Jeeves. There's all this innovation, and then there was a shakeout, and the shakeout was both technological based, what we call dominant design. Some dominant design shows up. So the Google dominant design of like just links and nothing else came through, and then also a business model, conciliation, right? Which is like, okay, like we're going to make the service free, but we're going to charge advertisers for access to the eyeballs, right? Both those things will happen. And so what I imagine is that in this vertical space, we're going to still in the super early days of ferment. It will be hard to bet on the winners yet. Right? But we need to have some theses about what do we imagine dominant designs to look like? What do we imagine the business models to look like? And then go invest with those, right? So for already what we're seeing is like maybe SaaS models don't work as well as consumption models potentially for revenue. Those are all questions that I think we're sort of seeing people ask as these things start to shake out.
Yeah, amazing. Let's shift away from startups for a bit and talk about big companies, Fortune 500 companies that are trying to become AI driven. They're definitely not AI first, but they're trying to embrace AI. What, in your experience, has been, what does the journey look like? And also, can you comment on culture and the human? Yeah. I remember in one of your classes, you talked about how if your org chart does not represent it doesn't have data and AI in it, like represented at the top, it's not going to happen. So tell us more about that.
Yeah. So I would say at the moment, every CEO and every board wants to figure out the AI thing, but they all have very different strategies and very different perspectives about this. And I think what's happening is that there is a lack of common frameworks and common perspectives inside of a company around AI, and a ton of mythology. And so one of the things I ask, and I've done this now informally in many of my public sessions that I do, and I think my sample size now since last year is about 10,000 people or so. I ask 3 questions. I go, how many of you use ChatGPT? And everybody raises their hand, or some generative AI. Then I say, how many of you think that in the next 3 years, this is going to change your job, your career, your whatever? They go, everybody raises their hand. So I'm like 80%, 90% say that they've used it, 75% to 70% say that it's going to change their job, their career, whatever. Then I ask, how many of you use these tools every day in your professional life? 10%. 10% say yes. So what I see is there's a massive knowing doing gap, right? A lot of people sort of know that's important, know it's going to change, but nobody's actually doing it. It's kind of like, teenagers and sex, right? Everybody talks about it, but nobody's actually doing it, right?
I hope my son's not doing it.
Exactly, right? But that's the point, right? Like, I think the issue is that a lot of people are talking, there's so much hype, but the number of people doing it is actually very low. And what I'm afraid about is that that's going to create an AI divide amongst companies. We used to talk about digital divides amongst citizens. I think there's going to be an AI divide amongst companies. And what I try to do when I work with executives and when we have people come to our campus or when I'm doing stuff in private is like throw them into working with ChatGPT so they can actually see what these tools do and how they solve problems, because that's the only way their minds will open up. But so at the moment, I would sort of say is that only a few companies get it and only a few companies are investing a ton in making it happen. The rest are still in like, security mode, governance mode, which are all important, which need to be done. But I think it's coming at the expense of not really rethinking your work and your processes to make this happen. And then that connects back to the culture. So there's an observation in computer science and in engineering known as Conway's Law, that the design of your technical architecture mirrors the design of your organizational architecture. So if your technical architecture is siloed, you have silos across your business units, you have silos and data sharing, you have all this overhead in terms of people being able to share knowledge and ideas and so forth, then that's going to reflect your technological architecture and your organizational architecture. And what we know from the development of AI and this notion of AI factories is that they want lots of data. The data has to cut across the entire enterprise and has to fit across, and that the siloizations work against what the economies of scale, scope, and learning are in an AI factory. And so the biggest challenge we sort of see, we have this rule that says 30-70. 30% is tech and it's declining, and 70% is culture and organizations. And this culture and organizations actually has to be from the top down. Like the executives, the board members, the CEOs have to believe in this, and then it has to then filter all the way down to the frontline workers along the way. And that's the only way we'll sort of see this actually take hold. But I'm actually worried about this divide between Fortune 500, between Fortune 1,000 companies.
And then at the individual level,
which by the way, that creates opportunity for entrepreneurs.
Absolutely,
right? Because if you can imagine new ways to do business at a much faster, cheaper way,
right?
What would the Ant Group be for consumer packaged goods? Right. What would the Ant Group be for a whole range of industries?
Everything. Right.
Right. And so I think that's the interesting thing. We've seen hints of this, like Moderna, and I'm an advisor to them. Moderna, as it's done in the pharmaceutical space, Tesla, and the automobile industry. Right. You're sort of seeing early examples, and what I imagine is that the next decade is going to create a whole range of entrepreneurial opportunities as well for entrepreneurs to go compete against the big guys, and see what they can do.
So if you're not an executive or a CEO at a company and you're not ready to jump on an entrepreneurial journey, what advice would you give kind of our listeners on how to be smart in this human AI collaboration? How to be like partner smartly with AI?
Yeah. Well, first, look, you have to sort of respect your company's policies about the use of these tools and so forth. But I would put myself on the bleeding edge inside of your company and take on projects that make sense of this. Raise your hand and say, pick me, coach. I'm ready to dive in. Second thing is start using this. Many companies have come out now have generative AI tools available through their various enterprise accounts. Start using them and use it for your work. Become an expert yourself. I've become an expert in this, both from I've got all my degrees and blah, 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 and my knowledge, but my best tutors have been on YouTube. Right, on how to prompt, what to do things, and I spend more time now watching YouTube than Game of Thrones, and so the point being that there's a ton of really great content out there that people have done and people have created, and this is an amazing opportunity for you to go try it and use it, and The analogy I try to use is the one that comes from Steve Jobs, right? He called the computer a bicycle for the mind in the 80s. And the bicycle helped humanity go further and faster. And the question is, I think now with ChatGPT, this bicycle for the mind has truly arrived. This is a cognitive boost for us. We can go further and faster, but we need to learn how to balance the bike. When we learn how to ride the bike, right, you fell down, you got a concussion, you got scraped knees and bloody elbows and so forth. You had to wear a helmet, right? And so there is a learning journey,
curve,
which is going to be which will be difficult, but requires investment. My friend Ethan Mollick says you need 10 hours. I think you need about 40 hours. But 40 hours over a month is doable, right? It's 5 hours on a Saturday, 5 hours on a Sunday for a month. Do the work and get it going, but apply it to your work, and then raise your hand in your organization to take on those projects.
I love the raising the hand, because a lot of even Smart Eye, the company that acquired my company Affectiva, like we are an AI company, but we're still having to figure out like how much on the bleeding edge do we want to be versus thoughtful and intentional about like the risks we're taking. And I think the folks who have raised their hand, whether on the engineering and software side or on the marketing team, like the folks who have raised their hand to embrace these technologies are definitely well positioned to keep because it's moving so fast too, right?
Exactly. And Mary Erdos, who's on our advisory council, she's the CEO of JP Morgan Wealth Management. She says there's a first mover advantage in adoption, and I truly believe that. It's not a winner take all business. These things are first mover advantages because this rate is so fast. So the more you wait, the further behind you are. But if you sort of keep up with the wave, right, then you're keeping up, and catch up won't be as hard.
So as we start wrapping up, I know you're about to launch a new course at Harvard. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So I'm launching it's a reboot of a course that we have a course on data science for managers. And I'm working with our faculty, and it's a required course for all 1,000 MBA students. It's called Humans Leading with Data and AI. And the idea is that all MBAs, all business folks need to have the foundations of how AI work, and starting with, like statistics, and then moving on to algorithms, and then moving on to AI factories and what it means for transformation. Cool. And that you don't need to be a statistician, you don't need to be an AI engineer, but you need to know how these systems work and where they work and where they don't work. And my dean, Shrikant Datar, is an accountant. Nobody will ever sign up to take an accounting course if it was optional, right? But we teach accounting because it's important for business people to understand how books come together, how these things come together. So same as our view about AI, that you don't have to be an AI technologist to understand the role of AI in your business and what it means for us. And so we're launching this course, we're rebooting this course, we're calling it Humans Leading with Data and AI. But the thing we're doing is that we're actually using generative AI at the core of it. So there's going to be a core spot where all the stuff we teach is going to be available for students. All of the statistical analysis that we'll be doing and all the models we'll be building will be on ChatGPT, because we want to equip our students to be able to enter the world with knowledge and confidence about how these tools work, what their limitations are, what the opportunities are, but also real hands-on experience in building GPTs, building bots and all that kind of stuff to solve business problems as well. So
I love it.
It launches in the spring of next year. I better get going and get to work because there's a lot to do.
It sounds awesome. I have major FOMO. Okay, last question. What are you most excited about as it relates to AI?
Look, I'm a eternal techno optimist, and there's a false dichotomy going on about technology and humans, which I think is wrong. Humans have always used technology, from fire to the wheel to agriculture. We've always built technology. That's what humans do. To be human is to be a technologist. And this is just another new toolkit in our capability. But now this toolkit is actually giving us cognitive superpowers. And so I feel like we're entering a very new age with these tools and these capabilities. And my hope is that this is not just limited to the elites, but everybody gets access to this and benefits from that. So I'm actually super excited about how we will use these cognitive tools. When people wear glasses, the example I give is that glasses were invented about 300, 400 years ago. And before that, if you didn't have glasses, you were functionally blind in society and you were knocked out. Glasses changed the lives of people that have bad eyes. Same thing with hearing aids, right? Hearing aids are actually really important for elderly for cognition purposes. If an elderly person is losing their hearing, then they're also going to experience cognitive decline, and you should really insist for your grandparents and so forth or your parents to actually get hearing aids. I'm in that conversation with my mother right now. Mom, put on your hearing aid.
Put it right.
But it's a cognitive tool. Glasses are a cognitive tool. Hearing aids are a cognitive tool. These are a cognitive tool as well. But now we can do so much more, and that's what I'm excited about.
Love that. We could go on forever, but it was great catching up with you. Thank you for making time for us. So inspiring as always.
Thank you so much.